Drake, welcome to the Taiwan On podcast series.
Hey, Mike, how's it going, man?
Good. And first off, congratulations. That's a heck of an honor. You know, that field is loaded with the best of the best in walleye fishing, and to, persevere and overcome some challenges. Of course, along the way in any tournament season, there's challenges, but to be able to top that field over the course of a year that's quite an accomplishment. And again, congratulations on that.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. It was something special, and it was definitely special to have it close to home. I mean, there's a lot of people that came up and watched the weigh-in on the second day and the third day to see it kind of get wrapped up, and for it to be close like that against, like you said, these guys are the best in the business. I mean, I grew up reading articles about them on how to catch walleyes, or watched them on YouTube or watched them on TV, and to hand it to them, 1 year or one time, was definitely good. And I can always hang my hat on that for at least a year. And next year when they maybe hand it back to me, but we'll see.
Well, and that's the thing about competitive fishing. My buddy Artie Arndt in Ortonville. Artie and I have fished several tournaments over the years, and we still competitively fish a little bit in the Big Stone Walleye League out there. And Artie always says, some nights you're the windshield, some nights you're the bug. You gotta enjoy the times when you're the windshield, because there's enough nights or enough seasons when you are the bug, as competitive as it is. So Drake, let's go ahead and let's talk a little bit about that Ottertail tournament. What'd you have going into that tournament in terms of your pre-fishing patterns?
Yeah, honestly, the pre-fishing was pretty good for me. I know a lot of guys said that they were struggling, and I think they were early in the week, because a lot of guys were fishing deep. A lot of guys think deep in the fall. And as you know, Ottertail is known to be a shallow lake, and the water temps hadn't cooled yet. So a lot of those fish were still shallow. And I knew that kind of going in, just because of what the temperatures were and stuff. So we fished shallow. I mean, we threw some rage swimmers, a jig and a minnow, pulled some big chubs around and stuff like that. But we were mainly focusing on that 3 to 7 foot range. And a lot of them were little breaks, that I've known growing up over the years, little rock piles that drop from 3 to 7 feet or 3 to 5 feet. And those fish usually just kind of hung there. So going into it, I was confident, but you know how tournament fishing goes. It can change in the drop of a hat. And like you said, so, to get off to a good start that first day really put me at ease going into the second days,
Mm-hmm. And talk about that first day. Now, you paired, if memory serves me right, you paired the first day with the young angler who ended up winning the co-side, correct?
Yeah, McKeever. It was kind of interesting how they did it this year. For the championship, you had to qualify. So if you were in first in points, you went with the first co-angler, second, third, which I was, and McKeever was in third. So I tell you what, that kid can fish. He did a great job. He's from Montana, and he goes, "Oh, I love to pitch jigs." And I was so happy when he said that, and right off the bat, I think we were 15, 20 minutes in, he got the first big one, was like a 22, 23 incher. And he did a great job. And then we were off to the races. I mean, it was a fun day.
Awesome. So Drake, when you talk about those, those 3 to 6, 3 to 7 foot breaks, you talked about rock. Was there weeds in the area? Any other kind of cover, or primarily those rock edges?
Yeah, for the most part, where I ended up fishing, it was rock edges. But at the same time, there were a few weeds. It's interesting what's going on up at Ottertail. It had zebra mussels, 5-6 years ago. I don't know. You maybe know exact day, but it cleared up the water, drastically until this year. For some reason, in July, it got dirty, and those fish are just up shallow. The weeds go to about, 7 feet is where the weeds start to get thick on that. And so we just kind of focused on that inside stuff where there's a little sandgrass and rock, but primarily rock. And that's where it seemed to be the fish used to be.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And those fish, first day, jig and a minnow primarily? Yeah,
for the most part. It's funny that you say that rage swimmer, you're catching smallies on Mille Lacs. We threw the rage swimmer a little bit too. Slow rolling it, much the same. there's something about that bait and catching walleyes. So we caught primarily the most of them on the jig in the minnow, but we threw that a little bit when I needed to try to get a big fish. But it worked. I mean, it worked out. McKeever got the second big one again at like 10:30. I said, well, there's 5 or 6 down there, and they all look like good ones. We swung over him, and he threw his jig in and said he got a bite, and that was 25.5 or 26 inches. So
wow.
Then I was really happy after that. I mean, it just sets your nerve, you know, and you could see, Otter Tail's a small lake, and you could see Mark Kortz, who was in first, and Chase Parsons, who were in second for the Angler of the Year points. I mean, they were running around a lot. So I knew if I just stayed patient, we'd just keep kind of plugging away at it.
Sure. Okay, so first day, nice catch, and now you move up to the lead going into day 2. And though it's a 3-day tournament, you're going to crown the Angler of the Year at the end of day 2 because the third day it's just the top 10 anglers, correct?
Yep. Yeah. Okay. So going into the second day, Mark, he had zeroed the first day, which, him and Chase, I mean, it's a rarity that those guys, rarity that they have a bad day, so I needed a little help there. But going into the second day, my main goal was just to catch 6 fish. I knew if I could catch 6 fish that I would have this thing wrapped up and I'd be in that top 10. I was sitting in 5th after the first day, only a pound out of first. So, it was a good feeling to just have to do that. And I think we had 6 fish in the boat the second day, about 20 minutes into the day. Wow. And then it was just one of those days where everything clicked, everything was working. And we were just off and running.
Sure. So did that pattern, location, did anything change the second day, or did those fish just bite a little bit better?
Yeah, I think they just bit a little bit better. Honestly, the first day I really didn't. I knew I played it like a 3-day tournament. I didn't want to use up all my fish. So that first day I just took. Again, I was lucky enough I could just take a sample of kind of my whatever 7-8 spots that I had. And that second day I went to the very first spot, and they were just snapping. I mean, it was the same wind, south wind. And I leaned on them a little more because I knew I could wrap this up and be off and running. So we stayed there, and lo and behold, I lost one really big one at about 9:30, 10 o'clock. That would have really helped. But at the end of the day, I mean, I was still super excited. And we had our 6 fish and weighed a little under, or right at 11 pounds, 11 and a half pounds. That 26 incher would have really helped move. But at that point, I was definitely just happy that the day was over, and I could be crowned unofficial Angler of the Year.
That's awesome. Drake, talk about that a little bit. I know that you travel and fish tournaments with your dad, John. Obviously a huge influence in your life and in your angling career. What's it like winning Angler of the Year in front of the guy who got you started on one of your home waters? That's got to be almost a surreal experience.
Yeah. I'm trying not to get emotional on you, Mike. But I mean, you named it. I mean, I know you were very close with your dad, and you guys fished a ton together. So for him to, introduce that to me and be there the whole time, it's unbelievable feeling. He's there for the good and the bad, and travels with me the whole time. So when it happened after that second day, I mean, I gave him one of the biggest hugs I've ever given him, I think. So we were both so happy.
That's awesome.
It was just one of those things.
That's awesome. And quite honestly, I'm a little bit choked up here too. Just bringing it up because Otter Tail's a lake where I spend a lot of time with my pops too. So it's okay. So let's regroup a little bit here, I guess. So now you've won.
I'm gonna blame that one on you.
All right. Yep. Noted. So now you've won Angler of the Year, and but that day 2 was the day when I don't know if you want to say walleye history was made, but what Eric McCoy did that second day on Otter Tail is pretty phenomenal. Talk about what he did and how that went down, because I know that you work with the McCoys as well.
Yeah. Eric had a little tougher pre-fishing. I kept telling him he needs to go shallower, needs to go shallower. Well, I tell you what, he had confidence in what he was doing, and for him to weigh what he did on Ottertail on
Mm-hmm.
5 fish, 23, almost 24 pounds, it's just unheard of. I mean, you
Yep.
just don't have that happen. The cool thing about it was, he was about 200 yards outside of me, maybe 100 yards, him and that Tom Hoyen.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, we were 1, 2, 3. Max Wilson was down a little ways, Kent Anderson. I mean, it was kind of the area there.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw him set the hook, and my co-angler was like, "Oof, that's a rock, right?" And I'm like, "I don't think so." He set the hook, and it was, a 9.5 pounder, and he got it in, and he sat down, and I'm like, "Man, that must have been a really big one." I saw it was big.
Mm-hmm.
So we kept fishing, and then about 5 minutes later, he stood up and he zings it out again, and my co-angler goes, "He's got another one," and I go, "No, there's no way." And sure, it was almost 7 pounder again. So
Wow.
he had 16 pounds on 2 fish on Ottertail, which those fish, there's 24s and 25,
Yep.
maybe a 26, but to get 27 to 29-inch fish consistently it was just like, oh my God, what is this kid doing?
Right. Right.
But it was so cool to just see it. And I got to see it up close, while I was trying to focus on
Mm-hmm.
catching big fish.
That's incredible. Well, and I talked with one of my buddies from back home who, when I was first started my guide career, I actually started in the early '90s on Ottertail, and he was not a guide, but a close friend and a really good fisherman on Ottertail. And he said to me, he said, "Mike," he said, "how many days do you think you spent on Ottertail in your life fishing?" And I said, "I don't know, but it's in the thousands."
Yeah,
He
right.
said, "Could you have ever had a 24-pound day?" And I
Yeah,
said,
yeah.
no. I mean, I put my best 3 days together and maybe get,
Yeah,
take the best fish out of those
exactly.
3 days. But
Yeah,
no, I mean,
yeah, yeah.
incredible.
And and I don't think any of us knew, growing up fishing, you would get 16 to 18 pounds was a huge bag.
Yep.
You were ecstatic, and just to see that happen and come out of Ottertail was just like, holy cow. And granted, these guys are the best, so I mean, they know how to get those
Mm-hmm.
big fish, but it was just like, wow.
Yep.
Didn't see that one coming.
Yep. How did he catch those fish, Drake? Can you share that with us?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, he was throwing a glide bait, and I'll be honest, he's a big fan of that Acme Hyper Rattle.
Mm-hmm.
He throws that thing religiously, and that's what got it done. I mean, some of those fish. The one thing that a lot of people, and Eric hasn't mentioned it a lot, is a lot of those fish were nowhere near bottom when he was casting at them. He was in whatever 12 feet of water, and he could see with his live scope, what was going on. And a lot of those fish would swim kind of off my flat, in that 4 to 5 foot range, and they would
Mm-hmm.
just go straight out, and they'd be suspended chasing those big schools of shiners or perch or
Yep.
whatever. So a lot of his fish, he just cast it over the top of them, and he would rip it over the top of their heads, and he said they would come up and eat. Not every fish, but that's how he caught a lot of them.
Yep, yep. Well, and it's interesting, Drake, when you say that those fish would move off those flats and suspend. The best pre-fishing day that I ever had on Ottertail leading into a tournament was my dad and I had this goofy notion that we could catch these fish pulling planer boards and crankbaits.
Yeah.
We were
Yep.
scrambling looking for things, and we actually caught 220. I think one was a 25 and one was a 26. Out suspended off the edge when we were turning in the boat around to try to go back into that 6 or 7 on top of that 6 or 7 foot flat.
Yep.
And I remember catching those 2 big fish. Well, of course, then the next day, that's part of our pattern. Well, that didn't work.
Yeah.
But
He's halfway cheating now with the electronics probably that he had versus what you had,
Right.
back in the day.
Right. But again, for him to do that, I mean, that's incredible. So talk a little bit. How is he obviously casting and retrieving that glide bait that you referenced? But is there any particulars or anything to that presentation that can be helpful to our listeners and our viewers?
Yeah. I think you got to kind of read the fish or read how the bite is. He would start out the day ripping it pretty hard, and he said if he couldn't get the fish to follow, he would just kind of slow down and slow down more. or you'd mix the cadence up. So if you're starting the day, you know, ripping it pretty hard and you're just not getting those fish to bite and react, you know, just slow it down, less of a pump essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, you know, it just worked. You know, it was funny. I could almost like call it every day when he was going to get his big fish. It was like between like 9:30 and 11 every day. And that was when our bite kind of slowed down. And I think those fish just kind of moved out there,
Sure.
and that's when he would just get on fire.
Sure. So last day 3, you're the angler of the year.
Yeah.
So now you're in the top 10. That kind of had to be just a day to go fishing. I mean, obviously there's always pressure in tournament fishing, but it had to be a little bit of a relief too. Talk about day 3 if you would.
My wife said I never snored so hard in between like day 2 and day 3. She's like, because I hadn't slept that much the whole week. You know, I was so nervous and everything that was going on. And I actually got to sleep that night between the second and the third. And like you said, I felt so much more relaxed. Yeah, I still wanted to compete to try to win this thing, but Eric was so far ahead. And I wasn't going to go out by him, you know, and play bumper boats with him. So I just kind of wanted it. I was just happy. We were catching fish. I think we caught, you know, 30, 35 fish that final day because I could really lean on spots to give them everything that we had. But we just didn't have that big fish bite. We had, you know, just under 11 pounds that ended up in 6th place. But like you said, I was so relieved. I was just happy to be there in that final day. That's what you go for every year, is to just be there on that third day of the championship. And it's the second time I've been there and been in that feeling, and it's awesome, you know. But at the same time, I was just relieved to have that angler of the year out of the way and could just go fish and relax.
Sure. So Drake, what's it been like since you've been crowned angler of the year? I know it's been busy. You and I have tried to touch base several times, but talk about that a little bit if you would.
Yeah. You know, it's amazing. You know, you don't realize how many people are following your journey until afterwards. I think a lot of them didn't want to jinx it or anything. So all the text messages and phone calls and interviews and everything. I mean, it's kind of a surreal feeling that everyone wants to talk to me. You know, I'm just trying to make it in this industry as you and I have talked about before. You know, I want it to be, I love this industry, and to be crowned, you know, the top, it's awesome, you know. But at the same time, I'm playing catch up at the shop. You know, I go fishing for a week and now I'm just playing catch up. So it's been an awesome feeling, and I'm taking in every minute of it, enjoying it. And hopefully we'll have some ice fishing here somewhat soon.
There you go.
Maybe not too soon though.
Exactly. We got a little work to do before then. But Drake,
exactly.
talk about, okay, so you're in the championship, you're pitching jigs and minnows. Walk us through, if you would, your jigging rod, your reel, line. Walk us through that, please.
Yep. So I was using the Lewis 610. You know, it's designed specifically for that jigging, pitching jigs. You know, it's got an extra fast tip on it to pick up the slack. I was using 6-pound fluorocarbon line from Strike King. I went down to 6, and my co-anglers probably hated me a little bit for it. And a lot of the guys were using Power Pro, but there's just something when I get out on Ottertail or some of these Minnesota lakes to having that 6-pound fluorocarbon there. I just have so much confidence in it when I'm fishing for walleyes. I mean, when we filmed a few shows and stuff, and you know that I like that line. So that's what I was using. And, you know, I go back and forth about it, you know, just because I had to re-spool my line almost every other day just because it was shot, you know, from what we were doing. But at the same time, I think it helped me get my bites and get those fish to the boat. Right. It's got a little stretch and give where, you know, with you know, a braided line, they can feel everything that you feel, versus that fluoro's just got a little give. So I think that was a big part. And then having that Lewis rod and reel, I mean, definitely helped. You know, fight the fish all the way back. The co-anglers, you know, they did a great job too. And for them to pick up a rod and do a great job is awesome. You know, that gives confidence in the rod and reel that they were using.
Right. Well, and two things, I guess, that I would add. First off, that the rod that Drake is referencing is the Lewis Speed Stick. There are some walleye specific models in that line. It's a 610 jigging rod, like you said. It's got a extra fast action, medium light tip. Cool thing about that rod is IM8 cork handle and $79.99.
Yep.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
and you used it to win
It's
the
funny
biggest
because
title in
people are
walleye
like,
fishing.
yeah, exactly. It's like people, I use that rod in well, 4 out of the 5 tournaments. The only one I sucked on was Erie, and I was trolling, but that rod, I would switch up at each of these in Power Pro, or braided line, or a fluorocarbon. But that 610 rod was in my hand 4 out of the 5 tournaments. And that just gave me all the confidence in the world. And
Right.
people are like, "Oh, that rod must be expensive and nice and really." Well, no, it's $79.99.
Yep.
Anyone can go out there and grab it.
Yep. And the cool thing is you rely on it to make your part of your living as a walleye tournament fisherman, and I rely on it to make my living in the TV industry. We're not going to use poor equipment when our livelihood is on the line. It's as simple as that. Let's talk a little bit about, if you could too, or if we could add, Drake is referencing for our listeners the tour grade 6-pound fluorocarbon line. And I get that question a lot as well. Why aren't you using braid? Because there are times when I'll go to fluorocarbon as well. And I think for the people that don't understand some of the water conditions in terms of clarity that Drake and I fish in the Alexandria area and up on Ottertail, is I tell people, for example, I was on Lake Ida the other day on a guide trip, and people my clients looked down and said, "Man, that water's clear." And I said, "Yeah, there's water in this area that's clearer than my bathtub water." And I say it jokingly, but one of the reasons that fluorocarbon is important in those waters is because it's nearly invisible to the fish, plus being able to have a little give and a little stretch in that line, I think helps that bait react a little or act a little more naturally. And like you said with braid, you can feel the fish, but they can feel you too. And sometimes having that stretch is important.
Yeah, there's just something about it, and people kind of look at you funny when you say that, but at the same time, then you prove it to them, and they can watch you, and then it's like, oh, well, that does make more sense.
Right. Last question, Drake, in terms of equipment, which of the loose spinning reels is your favorite now when you're fishing a jig?
I really like the speed spin, the smallest one, the 2000s for the most part. I will go down or up a little bit, but um, I like that. I don't like the big bulky ones. Robert and some of the other pros that fish them, they love the bigger ones. So for the most part, I stick to those small ones, and I don't know why. I don't really have a good example, but it's got a smooth drag, and I like everything about it. The back reel too. A lot of the times I back reel versus my co-anglers use the drag, and I got confidence either way doing it. So. A lot of the times I'll be back reeling, and they'll have the drag, and I have whatever happens because I know that I can trust in that stuff.
Right. Exactly. So what is on the agenda for you the rest of the fall, and talk about next year and your thoughts, looking ahead to, what do you do for an encore after you're
Yeah.
the angler of the year?
Yeah, exactly. I'm gonna relax a little bit. I do have a few TV shows to film. Obviously, one with you guys, and then a few others. So I'll do that. But honestly, come fall, I try to focus on duck hunting. My boys want to duck hunt and deer hunt and everything else, and I know you like to do that too. So I'm gonna relax, take it in, at least for the next couple months, and then start to think about next year maybe. It's another schedule. We're not really fishing too close to Minnesota, so we'll be traveling a lot. But at the same time, I mean, it's growing and it's fun. I like the NWT and everything it has to offer, and I think people are seeing it more and more as they're trying to for the angler and helping the angler, and it's been a fun ride. And so I think I'll focus on that come after the first of the year when fishing's a little slower.
Sure. We just got a question that came into the Facebook page here, Drake.
Yep.
This comes from Travis Hopkins. His question is best colored lure for ottertail. Talk about that if you would.
There is only one color I ever throw on ottertail. I shouldn't say that. There's probably two. It's either chartreuse, which is all chartreuse,
Yep.
or blue and white. Those are
Mm-hmm.
the only two colors I ever throw, and I'll have 100 of those jigs before any other color. It seems to work well, and it served me well in years past, and it did this year too.
Okay. How about in terms of jig size, weight? What were you throwing in the
Yeah,
championship?
eighth ounce is what I was throwing. I would go a little lighter when we would get up a little shallower, but we kind of kept the jigs moving, so I didn't want to go much heavier, much lighter. It seemed like that eighth ounce was the ticket, and one of the things about ottertail and even fishing walleyes in general, when you're in shallow water, if you're halfway down, in that 3 to 6 foot, if let's say I'm in 6 foot and I'm 3 or 4 feet down, like I feel that's plenty deep. Those fish in this clear
Mm-hmm.
water are going to come up. So that eighth ounce jig, it might not have been on the bottom the whole time, but I had confidence that those fish would come up when they saw it.
Sure. And what particular minnow were you tipping with, or did you try a
Um,
variety?
I tried a variety, but I ended up honestly, Burbank bait and tackle, Marshall Kep.
Yep.
Um, Sucker minnows, it
Yep.
seemed to be better for me. There's something about suckers on ottertail
Ottertail.
that
Yep.
that they love it. As much as I love fishing chubs, on other lakes and stuff, I couldn't get them to bite those. So we put on the old sucker minnow and went around and did our business.
Well, and when you say that, Drake, I don't find that surprising as well at all, because back in my guiding days, you know, for me, reading the experts always said a red-tailed chub in the fall. I could never really get a great red-tail bite going in the fall,
Yeah.
but I could catch them on suckers.
Yeah, it is something about it, and people always are like, "Well, why are you using suckers?" I'm like, "I don't know. I catch more fish on suckers at." And,
Absolutely.
well,
Yep. Yep. All right. So, Drake, again, we thank you very, very much for your time. Um, again, congratulations on an outstanding season and great accomplishment. Capping it off Angler of the Year there on Ottertail. And you and I will be together, hopefully in the boat in a not too distant future. And
yep.
we'll plan on having you on the Taiwan Odd podcast again next year.
Awesome, man. I appreciate it, and thank you, and just thank everyone for the messages. I mean, I truly appreciate everything that everyone has done, and from my employees to my wife to my sponsors. I mean, it wouldn't be possible without everyone. So
Sure.
thank you, and I know we'll be talking here soon about getting out and catching some more walleyes.
Sounds good. Thank you, Drake.
All right,
So,
man.
folks,
Talk to you
that was
soon.
that was Drake Hurd. Drake is now the reigning National Walleye Tour Angler of the Year. And Drake, again, lives in Alexandria, Minnesota. He's a Strike King and Lose Pro. And awesome year for Drake and his accomplishment. And not only winning Angler of the Year, but he had a bunch of top tens during the course of the year as well. Again, you don't make the top 10 against that field. You can get lucky maybe once, but to do it several times speaks to, number one, an angler's skill and talent, and number two, to the fact that they're on a roll. And Drake obviously got on a fish catching roll this year and did a great job. So